Hello everyone and welcome back to another average review. Just like yesterday, we are continuing the Spider-Man review week. This time with two of Spider-Man's earliest villains, Dr. Octopus and the Chameleon. If you're wondering why I also grouped the Chameleon in here, it's because there's not much to say about him. Although I do feel like it's important to include him since he was the first real supervillain Spider-Man ever faced. Sure, he faced an armed burglar in his first appearance, Amazing Fantasy 15, but the Chameleon was his first real villain. But hey, let's get into the sculpt of these two figures. Let's start off with the Chameleon since he's the most simple. Now, the Chameleon is on a really basic, suited Marvel Legends body. He's got dark blue pants and a jacket, along with a black tie and shirt. They're sculpted really nicely. We got the buttons and the collar on the shirt, the seam line on the back, and a lot of wrinkles on the pants and the arms on the jacket. Pretty basic looking shoes and standard Marvel Legends hand sculpts. I like the paint on the belt and the belt loops, though. That's pretty nice. The main thing about this figure that separates him from a standard suited Marvel Legends is that chameleon head sculpt. I mean, if you show this to someone and, well, they know who the Chameleon is, which isn't too many people, I'd say, they'd easily recognize it as the Chameleon. He's got the white face without the nose, and he's got some blue highlighting around the cheeks just to make him pop a bit more. I also really like the seam line running down the mask, too. Overall, pretty basic looking figure, but not bad at all. But come on. Dr. Octopus absolutely steals the show compared to the Chameleon. Just starting off with his base body, I'm pretty sure when this figure came out, everything except maybe the hands were all new. It's a lot more of a hefty, overweight body since that's how Doc Ock looks in the comics, It's got fabric tugs and seam lines. Some musculature is showing through the legs, but also with the fabric wrinkles too. It's got some really nice shades of green and the orangish yellow. And that's just the body itself. He's got the classic Dr. Octopus head, with the glasses, and in fact, he's even got eyes painted underneath, which is a really great detail. And of course, he's got the classic Doc Ock bowl cut. But where they really killed it was with the arms. Now, these aren't really like the bendy wire ones, but they're still really nice. We have these ones that just curl around, but then these ones that form more of an S shape going outwards. And they have these really nicely sculpted claws with the sculpted joints and the nice little blue paint right here, which I think looks really nice and helps to make that part of the claw pop out. Now let's move on to the articulation, and for both these guys, it's pretty standard Marvel Legends articulation. Chameleon's got a head on a disc hinge, which allows him to look up, look down, spin his head around, and get a little bit of tilt side to side. He's got an ab crunch with some pretty good range, but not much in the way of going backwards. He's got arms that raise not so high, under 90 degrees, bicep swivel that lets his arms spin around, double joint elbows with a really good bend, and hands that can swivel and hinge up or down. Below the waist, he's got a cut at the waist, which allows his torso to spin around like so. He's got legs that can kick forward about 90 degrees, but can't really split that far. He's got a thigh cut, which allows his legs to wobble around like so, and double joint knees with an R-right bend. His feet can hinge backwards, forwards, and pivot side to side. I've taken the tentacles off of Doc Ock just to show the articulation better, but for the most part, he's got the same overall type of articulation as Chameleon, but Doc Ock has some great range for a character as hefty as him. Now, he can't really look up far. He can look down better, though, and can spin his head around. Now, unlike the Chameleon, who had an ab crunch and a waist swivel, Doc Ock just has a diaphragm joint, which means he can hinge forward a fair amount, hinge backwards the same, tilt side to side, and spin around. Once again, he's got arms that can spin and raise about 90 degrees. He's got a bicep swivel, double joint arms with an alright bend for arms this big, and once again, Marvel Legends hands that can swivel and hinge up or down. Below the waist, he's got legs that can kick this far and split a very good amount. Once again, thigh cut, double joint knees, and actually a boot cut which allows him to spin around at the calf. He's still got the feet that can hinge backwards, forwards, and pivot side to side. To be honest, I'm surprised to say this, but Doc Ock might be more articulated than the Chameleon, at least in terms of his range. But hey, let's get accessories out of the way. Now, I don't have any of the accessories for the Chameleon, but he came with 2 alternate heads since, well, the Chameleon's whole thing is disguising as other people. Those heads were of J. Jonah Jameson and Hammerhead. Of course, you could just use those as the Chameleon disguising as those characters, but since it's a standard suited body, you could also just use those alternate heads on this body as those 2 characters. He also came with the left arm for the Rhino Build-A-Figure and 3 different guns. Now, Dr. Octopus was part of the SPDR Build-A-Figure wave, although he didn't really come with any of the Build-A-Figure pieces. He was just one of those figures that's part of the wave, but doesn't come with the pieces. But he does have accessories, depending on whether you count his 4 arms as accessories. I guess they'd count, but that's all depends on how you view it. But now, let's move on to the figure comparisons. Starting off with the standard male and female figures I use for these comparisons, Renew Your Vows Spider-Man and Spinneret. Of course, these 2 are both Spider-Man villains, so I had to bring Spider-Man in, obviously. But since these guys are some of the earliest Spider-Man villains, let's bring out some young Spideys, being the Amazing Fantasy 15 first appearance Spidey on the left, and on the right, the Ultimate Spider-Man from the Vulture 2-pack. Speaking of Ultimate Vulture, though, here he is. Sure, it's a bit more of a modern design to these 2's fairly classic designs, but Vulture, similar to Chameleon and Ock, was a very early Spider-Man villain. They're both antagonists to Spider-Man and were included as alternate heads for the Chameleon, so here's No Way Home J. Jonah Jameson and the retro-carded Hammerhead. Jameson shares the same legs and arms as the Chameleon, but Hammerhead definitely got an upgrade in the size department. I mean, look at how much bigger he is compared to Chameleon. Now, he may not have been a Spidey villain as long as these 2 have, but still, Green Goblin is definitely one of Spider-Man's arch-enemies, and also one of the many creations of Steve Ditko, similar to Doc Ock and Chameleon. And I think it's undeniable that the Green Goblin has had more of an impact on the entirety of comics compared to these 2, because of, well, the night that Gwen Stacy died. After all, most people consider that the end of the Silver Age of comics. Now, bringing out the Marvel Legends Villains Wave Red Skull may seem like an odd choice, but the Red Skull's actually had a fairly large impact on Peter Parker's life. I mean, one of the imposter Red Skulls ended up killing Peter Parker's parents since, well, they were spies, and he was against them. But also in the Spider-Man animated series, the Red Skull was the overarching villain of the 6 Forgotten Warriors story arc. And in that story arc, it was revealed that the Red Skull was the biological father of Electro and the adopted father of the Chameleon. What an odd family tree. So speaking of Spider-Man the Animated Series, both Doc Ock and Chameleon were part of that series' version of the Sinister Six, called the Insidious Six in the show. So I'm going to bring out 2 members of that team that I have in Marvel Legends form, starting off with the retro-carded Rhino. Who boy, this guy makes for a really fantastic display piece. And finally, the Chameleon. Now that I'm looking closer to these two, they have the same weird kind of mask where their teeth are actually showing, but the mask goes over their lips. But the Insidious Six were practically just pawns for the kingpin of crime, seen here in the Spider-Man retro carded version, which might just be the best kingpin ever made. Although, for a comparison with, well, the only other 6-inch Doc Ock I own, here's Doc Ock and the Chameleon with the Toy Biz Spider-Man 2 Alfred Molina Doc Ock. Chameleon, move out of the way. Doc Ock's tentacles are hitting your head. Although, as is tradition, here's Doc Ock and Chameleon with Hit Monkey and Goliath. Now, you may be wondering why I brought the Marvel Legends Hydra Soldier out. Well, it's because the orangish yellows on Doc Ock and the Hydra Soldier's hands, they actually match pretty well. The difference is a bit more noticeable on camera, but in person, they're nearly identical. Why do I bring this up? Well, Doc Ock comes with a right fist, and the Hydra Soldier actually comes with a right accessory holding hand. So, if you were to swap these two around, you could get a Hydra Soldier with an extra fist, or Doc Ock with two accessory holding hands. Back to Doc Ock, though, let's quickly talk about these tentacles. Now, each of them has these little tiny letters printed on them that will be either XR, XL, or SL and SR. This is actually to tell you where to put the tentacles in. So, for example, SR would go right here. Of course, this isn't how it has to go, I just think this is how it was intended. You can mix and match wherever you plug the tentacles in, however which way you'd like. But, once again, let's get back to the tentacles. They actually have a little bit of articulation, being they can spin around right here, and they have a bit of a ball joint at the base of the claw, which allows them to wobble around and spin. Now let's talk about the type of dough you gotta spend to get these guys. Doc Ock, I'd say ranges from between 30 to 40. Chameleon, 25 to around 35. It depends on if Chameleon comes with all the accessories or not. Now, both of these are really good figures of some of Spidey's most classic villains, but they aren't without flaw. Doc Ock, for example, his base figure is great, but those tentacles being super pre-posed without many posing options other than mixing and matching them really makes it hard to make this figure super dynamic. The Chameleon has the opposite problem. His accessories are great, but the base body is pretty generic. Now, this doesn't make these figures bad, but it weakens them a bit. So, I think I'm gonna give Dr. Octopus a 9 out of 10. Still a really great figure, and the Chameleon a 7 out of 10. Not bad, just pretty average. To everyone that's still here, remember to play nice, and have a great day.